The NHL Draft Combine is underway in Buffalo, and with the Islanders holding the first overall pick, you know what happens there will have a big impact on this team. We'll talk about that and a lot more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us today to talk a little Islanders hockey. We have got a lot to get to on today's show. The NHL Draft Combine is underway in Buffalo. How will what happens there affect the Islanders and their pick first overall in this year's draft? We'll break some of that down. Plus, Matthew Darche discusses who's in the core of this team, and we continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders with Hudson Fashing. The Draft Combine is huge, and it will have a big impact on who the New York Islanders ultimately select with the first overall pick. And let me say this. You look at this draft right now, and there are roughly 3 players who are considered, well, there are 2 players who are considered in a tier above everybody else, and then the next tier starts with James Hagens, the Long Island native. You have Matthew Schaefer and Michael Misa, 1 and 2. They're in a category by themselves, according to most scouts. And then there is less consensus about who's third overall, but the latest list compiled by the draft experts over at The Athletic did list James Hagens, the Long Island native, as the third overall prospect in this draft. And Matthew Darche, if you'll recall, at his introductory press conference, said that he would listen to any offer made by another team if they want that first pick, but that they would have to knock his socks off, I believe was the phrase that he used. He expects to make that first selection. Now, look, everydayers, you know, we've talked about this a little bit before. We know that the San Jose Sharks prefer Matthew Schaefer. In my mind, if the New York Islanders could make a trade with the Sharks or the Blackhawks to move down maybe 1 or 2 spots in this draft, still get James Hagens or Michael Misa, and then add, an extra first-round pick either this year or next year, maybe some prospects, maybe 2 first-round picks, whatever that package would be, I would not be averse to that because it would definitely help springboard this retool that this team so desperately needs. But ultimately, the scouting combine gives NHL teams the opportunity to get to know some of these players, and then obviously they run a bunch of physical and medical tests so that they can maybe separate players who they believe are very close in the rankings. So, all throughout this process, and it did get underway Monday, June 2nd, teams can interview players one-on-one between now and June 6th. On Wednesday, medical assessments will also be given, and players will not be able to participate in the physical testing aspect of things until they clear through the medical screening. Then on Friday, there will be the maximal VO2 test, and then they'll run 7 of the 11 fitness tests on Saturday, including the standing height wingspan, the force plate vertical jump, the bench press, the horizontal jump, the Wingate cycle ergometer test, pro agility test, pull-ups, etc. So there's a lot of physical testing that's going to go on. And, part of this, keep in mind with Matthew Schaefer, he will not be doing the bench press. Among other things, he'll do most of the other drills, but not the bench press, as, that broken collarbone wants to make sure it's healed. But clearly, having these physical tests being done, the Islanders organization will get a better idea as to where they feel they are with regard to Schaefer's recovery from the injury and how, if at all, that affects the way that, they consider him as, potentially that first overall pick in the draft. So we'll see how it all plays out. It will be interesting, character and the way players answer some of these questions. By the way, James Hagens spoke to the media on Monday and talked a little bit about what it meant to him that the Islanders have that first overall pick. He said, being from Long Island and always being around the Islanders my whole entire life, I know how exciting that is for all my friends and every Isles fan out there. You just have to be grateful for whichever team takes a chance on you. It's cool that the Islanders won the lottery, but you don't know what's going to happen on draft day. Now, he did also say that he saw some of those bumper stickers and signs saying, bring Hagens home. He said it's cool when you see people around Long Island supporting that and having that on their car. It's special. Growing up an Islanders fan and seeing them get that first pick, naturally, you're happy and excited. And look, I think it's great. I think it's really, really great that Hagens is a lifelong Islander fan and that he wants to play for this franchise. But again, I will reiterate something that I still believe and have said, and that is that should not be what determines who you're going to select when you've got the number one overall pick in an NHL draft. You need to take the best player available who's going to have the biggest long-term impact on your team. And whether that's Schaefer or Misa or Hagens, the fact that the guy is from Long Island should not enter into the ultimate decision. Now, again, if there are two players who are dead even, you could use that as the tiebreaker. But keep in mind, it's very rare that two of the top three prospects, let's say, in a draft would be absolutely even, and then you would use that as sort of the tiebreaker. I think Hagens will develop into a very good NHL player, probably either a second line or first line player. The thing about Hagens, he is more of a playmaker than a goal scorer. And, if you want the goal scorer at the top of this draft, you think Misa. If you want the defenseman who can control the tempo of a game and be a great two-way defenseman who can be on the ice for 25, 27 minutes in a game and really sort of help that transition from defense to offense, quarterback the power play well in all three zones, and you want to go more with Schaefer. So, again, you're trying to project where guys are at 17, 18 years old and what they'll be like at 24, 25, 30, etc. It is not a science. It is an art form, and you're not always going to get it right. But you only get the opportunity to select first overall in an NHL draft. On average, right now, it should be once every 32 years. For the Islanders, this is the first time in 16 years that they've had the first overall pick. Last time, 2009, John Tavares. You want to get this right. And so, as much as I like Hagens, and I think it would be a great story for him to come to the island, to me, the way you get Hagens on the Islanders is you trade back to number 3, 2, 3, 4, at the latest 5, and hope that he's there. I personally would rather stick in the top 3. So there's only 2 teams, therefore, that you could make that trade with and still remain in the top 3. Whether or not Matthew Darche can be bowled over enough or have his socks knocked off enough to make that happen remains to be seen. But this week, the Islanders and the rest of the teams in the National Hockey League will have to figure out what their next move is, and interviewing these players and going through all of that is going to be critical for the ultimate decision that the New York Islanders have to make. And we will see what they ultimately decide to do. But hopefully, hopefully, the New York Islanders make the right decision and bring in the best player available. And the interviews and the physical testing and all of that takes place this week will indeed go a long way to determining who it is that they ultimately select. And that will have a big impact on the future of this franchise. We have got a lot more to get to on today's show. Matthew Darche spoke about who's in the Islanders' core, in his opinion. We'll talk about some of the important omissions and inclusions. We'll also continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders with Hudson Fashing. And for our Islanders' birthday of the day, a winger who was with the team in the early to mid-90s. Let's see if you can guess who this Weymouth, Massachusetts native is. We've got that and more next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It's just the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. But if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So, Matthew Darche addressing the media and kind of trying to discuss who is in the core of this team and who's not. And Darche has kind of said, you know what? We're not going to tear it all down. And we knew this. Ownership wasn't going to go for a full rebuild. But when you have a retool, and hopefully once the deals that Lou Lamoriello signed before he was let go are done and no more have to be announced, Matthew Darche can begin to put his stamp on this team. Who's in the core are indeed important. And Darche did an interview with TVA Sports and basically spelled out that the core, according to him, is Ilya Sorokin, No surprise there. Noah Dobson and Alexander Romanov on the blue line, and then Matthew Barzal and Bo Horvat among the forwards. Those are the 5 players who, according to Darche, are part of the core. Now, obviously, Darche can change his mind at any point when he sees players practicing or playing, when he, during training camp even, things could change. Injuries could change it. Players doing better than expected, players slumping, all of these things can change the ultimate decision as far as who's in the core. But here's the thing. I'm a little bit surprised about Romanov being part of the core. Only because Darche said he wanted to play an up-tempo, fast-paced game. And Romanov is not, he doesn't play that style. He is not the fastest skater. He's not the kind of guy who is going to do that. Now, you still need good defensive defensemen, and Romanov would kind of fit that bill if healthy and if he can be a little more consistent. But, he's 25 and entering his prime right now. Defensemen tend to take a little longer to mature and develop than forwards, power forwards than scoring forwards. There's a whole hierarchy on this. But regardless, I'm a little surprised about Romanov. And keep in mind that both Dobson and Romanov are restricted free agents that Darche still needs to sign either to a arbitration deal, going to arbitration, signing a 1-year deal, a bridge deal, or that long 7 or 8 year full big, this is your, prime of your career contract. That remains to be seen what the decision is. But it does indicate one of two things. Either these are the guys that Darche wants to build around, or he's willing to trade or the rights for either one of them and wants to drive up the price. Not on this list, by the way, and this was interesting. Anders Lee, the captain, not on the list of players who Darche put in the core. And Lee's age could have a lot to do with that. Same thing with the former shutdown pairing of Ryan Pollock and Adam Pelech. They are not considered part of the core, at least the core listed by Matthew Darche. So ultimately, the decision has to be made. You build around that core. Players who are not on that list are more likely to be potentially, at least, traded. And again, everydayers, just going back to yesterday's show, that's one of the reasons why I don't like the no trade clause, the full no trade clause for Kyle Palmieri. It's not that I don't like Kyle Palmieri as a player, but I don't want the organization's hands tied. I want the Islanders to be able to move on from veteran players, free up some cap space, make this team younger, faster, more skilled, and more physical, and go from there. And the thing is this, right now, the New York Islanders have about $20 million in cap space after you add the 2 deals of Adam Boqvist and Kyle Palmieri that were announced over the weekend. If you add up the salaries of Simon Holmstrom, Maxim Siplikov, Alexander Romanov, and Noah Dobson, that's pretty much most of your $20 million. And that doesn't include potentially re-signing Tony DeAngelo or Scott Perunovich. There are other, players who you might want to bring back, depending on the circumstances. But realistically speaking, right now, what happens? We don't know just yet. And I want to be able to free up cap space. I want to be able to make it so that this Islanders team can speed up this retool that you need to get out of the muddy middle. And maybe my concern so far with Matthew Darche is him saying, "Oh yeah, we're not that far from being a playoff team. We think we can make the playoffs right away." Maybe you can. But with this core, and we've seen it over the last 4 seasons, the ceiling is squeaking into the playoffs and losing fairly easily in the first round. You want to do better than that. You want to be, as Matthew Darche alluded to in his press conference, you want to be a perennial playoff team who is considered a cup contender. And in order to do that, you need to identify your core, which Darche did in this interview, build around it, but move out some of those unessential pieces that don't fit what you're trying to do or who are going to give you diminishing returns and don't fit into the overall philosophy of the way you want to build the team. Will Darche start to put his stamp on the team? I have to hope so, because again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And this Islander team cannot afford to do the same thing over and over again, because the results will either be the same or worse. And we don't want to see any of that happen. We want a solid new era of Islanders hockey. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We continue our player-by-player analysis of the Islanders with Hudson Fashing. What was his season like? What, if any, role does he play on this team in the future? Plus, we'll have our Islanders birthday of the day. All that coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. So we continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders with Hudson Fashing. We, on the last 3 shows, we did Anders Lee, we did Marcus Hogberg, and JG Pageau. We continue. This is now our 4th week analyzing this roster, one player at a time. Today, Hudson Fashing. And, Fashing had a little bit of a disappointing season. He is 29 years old. He'll turn 30 at the end of July. He is not a kid at this point. He is not a prospect. He is not a player who is probably going to get significantly better than what he's shown himself to be. And in his limited NHL action, he has shown that he has the potential to be a hardworking, physical, 4th-line player who can contribute on the forecheck and add a little bit of physicality and grit and score the odd goal now and again. He had a really good half season with the Islanders in 2022-2023. 10 goals, 19 points in 49 games, and a +10 plus-minus. But in the 2 seasons since then, he has struggled a little bit more. 4 goals and 14 points in 2023-2024. 2 goals and 4 points last year in 43 games. That's not a very good return. He had 4 points, a -4 +/- penalty minutes. His shots on goal actually went up to 51. His shot attempts were up slightly. His ice time was down almost a full minute per game. The hits were down from 40 in 45 games to 28 in 43 games. And I think that was a big mistake, like a big aspect of his game that was missing last year. And we want to see Hudson Fashing get back to the type of game he played 2 years ago, and also to sort of get back to where he contributes as a physical presence on the fourth line. He's not a goon. He's not somebody who is going to go in there and take people's heads off, but he's solid on the forecheck, and he can dig in the corners, and he can create occasionally some offense. Now, here's the rub. Fashing is an unrestricted free agent. I would say the odds are 50-50 at best that he returns to the New York Islanders this season. And it would not surprise me that any deal he signs would be a two-way deal so that the Islanders wouldn't have to pay him the league minimum if they end up sending him down to Bridgeport, if they do re-sign him, or even if he signs with another team, that they would say, okay, if you're on the NHL roster, you'll get $775,000 or $800,000 a year. But if you go down to the AHL, here's $175,000 or $200,000, whatever the case may be. I like Hudson Fashing. I was disappointed in his play this year. And if they re-sign him, and like I said, 50-50 at best, and we'll see whether or not Matthew Darche has a different opinion of Hudson Fashing than Lou Lamoriello did. But if they sign him, no guarantee he's on the opening game roster or that he makes the team. You know, if he does, he very well could fill the Matt Martin role of a year ago where, you know, he's the 13th or 14th forward on the roster. So we'll see about Hudson Fashing. A likable player, hardworking player, but he needs to be more consistent than he was last year and show the Islanders more. We'll keep an eye on his contract situation throughout the offseason. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day, and Monday was the 55th birthday of former Islanders winger Marty McInnis, the Weymouth, Massachusetts native, drafted by the Islanders in the 8th round back in 1988. Spent 3 years at Boston College, had 2 20-plus goal seasons at BC, joined the Islanders in the 91-92 season, became a full-time player the following year in 92-93, had his most productive season with the Islanders in 93-94, 25 goals, 56 points that year, and a plus 31, but remained on the island until late in the 96-97 season when he was dealt to Calgary, played for the Flames, the Ducks, and his hometown Bruins before hanging up his skates after the 02-03 season. McInnis played in 796 NHL games, 170 goals, 420 points, 330 penalty minutes, add 3 goals, 5 points in 22 playoff games. 7 of those games and 1 of those assists came with the Islanders. One of his better games with the Isles, how about November 27th, 1996? The Islanders in their fisherman jerseys hosting the Philadelphia Flyers. Ron Hextall, the starting goalie for Philadelphia, Tommy Salo in between the pipes for the Islanders. This was a tough, physical game. Islanders up 1-0 on a goal by Kenny Janssen midway through the first period. And 12 seconds after Janssen scores, Marty McInnis, our Islanders' birthday of the day, makes it 2-0 Islanders. Nicholas Anderson and Dennis Vasky get the helpers. Then, after the teams each score once in the second period, the Islanders clinch the win with another goal by Marty McInnis. Brian Berard with the only assist. That comes at 17:47 of the third. Islanders win this game over the Flyers by a score of 4-1. Ron Hextall chased and replaced by Garth Snow. So 2 future Islanders in this game, or 2 people who played for the Islanders. Hextall was already an ex-Islander by this point. Meanwhile, for Marty McInnis, he scored the game-winning goal. He had 2 goals on 5 shots, and he was a +1 in this game. He was one of the few players without a penalty minute. The Islanders' penalty minute leader, Mick Vukota, with 14. There were just a lot of extracurricular activities. Scott Daniels led the Flyers with 16 penalty minutes. But Marty McInnis, a pretty good middle six scoring winger, he is our Islanders' birthday of the day. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You can find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, send us an email to lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can follow the show on X at Locked On Isles. You can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders throughout this critical offseason. And it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you anytime. Tomorrow on the show, we will continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders with Maxim Siplikov. Plus, we will have some more news coming from the scouting combine. By the way, did not mention this, forgot to mention it. Bo Horvat, ankle injury suffered at the Worlds, 4 to 6 weeks. He should be fine and ready for training camp, and it should not have any major effect on his offseason program. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.